to share a tie-in of a shrimp fly that I've done. This is made out of the flexo body that you normally use for crab bodies. It's a braid. This is a size 4 hook and it's a 1/4 inch braid. I have tied them down as far as an 8, but you do need smaller braid for that. We'll go through the materials in a minute. I do like this fly because it's very simple to tie, but it can be even simpler than this, or as more complicated as you really like. It's only your imagination that's going to limit that. But I like the way it sits, the way it looks in profile. If we just go through the materials. The hook is a size 4 TMCO stainless hook. The thread is the GSP 100, really strong stuff. I do like to overdub the head with this pink number 2 Glow Bright floss. The eyes are a 4mm, just a stainless looking dumbbell, any sort of silver colour. The braid is this is the 1/4 inch version. As I say, that's good for the size 4s. If you're going down to the size 6s and that sort of thing, you do need something a bit smaller. That's a 4mm, and that seems to work really well with the smaller flies. So if I just set the vise up, we'll give it a go. I've got a size 4 in the vise, so always try and cover the point up. You don't want to catch the thread. Really annoying when you get to the end of the fly and you catch the thread and it breaks on you. So just lay your body down. Doesn't matter where to at the moment. Just trim it off. I've got a little scalpel I use, and then run it back up towards the eye. Leave a little bit more room than you normally would. These heads can be quite bulky. I'll show you why in a minute and how to get around it. So just catch the dumbbell on and square it up. And this GSP thread you can really pull down on it, so bind it in nice and tightly. You don't want them twisting round. That's nice and steady. Usually try and look from the side, make sure they're fairly level. That one's pretty good. And then run the thread down to the flat part of the hook, just around the bend there. Right, now using whichever pink crystal or coloured crystal that you want to use. So this works really well for me. Grab about 6 or 8 strands of it, and try and stagger the ends. It looks more natural. You can always trim them a bit later. And then you want probably a little bit more than the whole length of the hook, so you can trim them down and put those on there and just catch them in. Right. Try and keep them over the hook itself. Trim off the excess. Hang on to these because we're going to use those for the body as well. So right, now then tie these right around the bend. Don't forget this hook is upside down at the moment, how it's going to be fished. So we want these sticking up in the air, so turn them right around the bend, so that they are actually looking down in this case, but as soon as we turn the hook over they'll be looking up in the air. Okay, and then run the thread back up a little bit. Right, just take the crystal that you've just cut off from doing the tail and lay that in, catch it in as best you can, right around to where you finish with the thread. Then run the thread right the way back up to the dumbbell eyes and just past it, just keeps it out of the way. Okay, what I like to do now is just take a little bit of super glue and just a little bit over the body. It just keeps all of these things in place, especially if the species you're after has got a few teeth. And then just run that up to the eyes. I like the pink effect of these, but it's also the iridescence as well. It seems to catch the light in so many different ways. And then just lay them over the top. There we go. So it's going to be the underside of the fly, and tie in a couple of turns and trim them off. Now all these loose ends of this crystal that you're cutting off, hang on to it because we're going to use that again in a minute. Now, just a couple of turns there. I'd just like to put a half hitch over it to keep it all in place. Got a habit of knocking the thread, it's really annoying. Okay, so body and tail, really simple. Now we come to the Alphlexo body. This is the 1/4 inch, and normally you'd use it like that for a crab, but we're going to use it like this. So what I like to do is, you see it's a natural curve in it, the way it's been stored in the box, in the bag. If you lay it on one way, you get that effect where the body seems to curve that way, or you can lay it on the other way where the body actually feels like it's going downwards. I prefer it that way because it just looks more natural to me. So take a piece that's probably 1/2 inch, 12-15mm longer than you'd actually use on the hook, and trim that off. Okay, so you end up with a piece like that. Now, because these are quite bulky, we need to taper the head down. So just trim it down, turn it over, trim it down, and then the underside of it, because this is going under there, trim off again. It just keeps the head nice and small. Okay, now that is going to sit underneath the hook like that. So what we've got to do now is put a slit in the material as far as where the hook's going to go. So if we go like that, we've now got a slit right the way through. Okay, now the beauty of this fly as well is you can tie most of it up this way in the vise and then turn it over later. It just makes it a lot easier. So get the slit, hold these tail bits out of the way and slip it on there. Doesn't really matter how it looks at the moment. And get that bit so that you can catch it all in with the thread. Okay. So this GSP thread is really strong. You can pull down on it. I like to just go over that way, just so it's caught right in at the back. And for the white thread, that's it. So a couple of 1/2 inches. Done. Now, as I say, I like to use the pink floss over the top. Just gives it a bit of a target, I feel. You've got to remember though is that this pink floss is nowhere near as strong as the GSP, so don't pull down too tight on it because it will snap fairly easy. Form a small head, This is where we trim down the braid. Trim that off. Make a mess of that. There we go. Now then, good thing to show here. I've left a little bit of a thread there by mistake underneath, just on this. Now these cautery knives are really good, particularly for this braid material. If you've cut it so that you've got a little bit of overhang of the braid there, or in this case the floss, you can just tidy it up using these cautery knives. Really handy things, and you can get much better finish than you can with a knife or a pair of scissors. Right, at this point I always put a little bit of super glue over the head. You see that there's still a little bit of thread there, but once that's dry I'm going to catch it with the cautery knife again. Sometimes when you're doing these and you make mistakes, you find your own way of getting out of things. And I find I learn more by making mistakes than getting it right first time. So let's use the cautery knife, just take that out. There we go. And like I say, with this fly, if you want to, that could be the finished fly. Very similar to a gotcha, just with the body braid. And that would work, and we could leave it there if we wanted to. I prefer to put some legs underneath it and some eyes on the back, but it's a personal preference. It's very good fly. You can do it however you like to do it. Right, I'm going to put that one back in the vise and put some legs on. Right, for the legs, you can use many materials. I actually tried using the braid itself, just cutting it on the underside there and pulling the legs up. Works, it's quite fiddly, but it also weakens the body material. So what I ended up doing is using exactly the same material I used for the tail and the body, this pink crystal, and use a little bobbin threader. And just by passing that through the thread and feeding these in, it's probably about 6 bits there, doesn't really matter, and angle them back, leave those long for a minute, and then same on this side of the body at the back. Just feed them in. Okay, don't forget this is going to be the bottom of the fly, so the legs are nicely angled back. Then as you go forward, I use less material in the legs. Again, this is just a preference. Some more. So there's 2 sets. Let's do one more set nearer the head. Can get a bit fiddly. This is why I say it's as simple or as complicated as you want to make it, really. There we go. one of the threads fall out, but it doesn't really matter. The fish really aren't going to count them. It's just to give the impression of legs. And the last one's up through there. Okay, so now we're going to have to turn this fly over. I hold this bit in my hands for a minute and trim off the excess on what is now the top of the fly. Just be a little bit careful because you don't want the legs to drop out at this stage. Okay, you can see they've left a few little spikes sticking up. Not a problem. Now, need to run some super glue over this just to hold the legs in place. Now, if you've seen my times before, you know that I tend to stick my fingers together, so just be a little bit careful because this Zappa Gap is really good stuff. Now keep it away from the hook itself. Don't want to coat that, don't want to affect its hooking capabilities. Okay, so just a little layer over that to keep those in place. Give that a few minutes to dry, and we'll form the legs. Okay, so hopefully it's fairly dry and it doesn't stick to my fingers. Right, so what I do now is I get a fairly decent pair of scissors and angle them so that they're longer at the back and shorter at the front. Okay, and just take them all off in one go. I missed a few back there, so let's do that. Still keeping the angle. When you look, nice little legs, nice bit of movement in there. The light catches these as well, which I find is really good. Okay, and then once the super glue is dried on the top, you can trim off these little spiky bits if you want to. I don't think it really matters. I mean, the shrimp bodies aren't dead smooth. Now again, if you want to, you can stop there. Perfectly good fly, I'm sure it'll work. I like to just trim up these tail bits of the braid and actually put an eye on there. Now again, with the eyes, I just use varnish, to be honest. You could use the crab eyes that come on the stems. I find they're a bit bulky, but again, personal preference. And all I do is I put a little dab of super glue there, let it dry thoroughly, and then just put a little spot of varnish on either side and let that dry. Now I'm going to do that in a minute, but if the fly's going to go wrong, this is where it's going to go wrong. Because if you don't let it dry or you put too much varnish on, you don't get a round eye, you get a smudge that runs down through the rest of the fly. Probably doesn't matter, but you know, when I'm tying flies I like them to look nice. They're as much to catch the fishermen as they are to catch the fish half the time. So I'm going to let all that dry a minute and we're going to come back and try and put a bit of varnish on these. I'll show you what can happen and what can go wrong. Right, so we're going to put the eye, a little dab super glue, matched on the other side. Like I say, let that dry thoroughly. Now what I tend to do for the eyes, I just use the old black fly tying varnish for the heads, and I've got a little pin that I've put in a pair of forceps, and I use the top of the pin. It's quite effective when it works and very annoying when it doesn't. So get the black varnish, give it a good shake, and then rather than dip the pin into the bottle, if you look into the cap, there's a lot of varnish been deposited in there. and if you dip the pin in there, you'll see it picks up a nice little round blob, which when the varnish is dry, the super glue is dry on the fly, that deposits a nice little round head sometimes. Because you've still got the tail of this, it's nice and easy to hold. So just get a little bit, don't go too much on there to start with, and with a steady hand start with a small eye. If you want it bigger, you can always go bigger. If you put in too much to start with, there's no going back. There you've got. Okay. Yeah. That one there just started to spread a little bit. So just going to a little bit more. So if it's going to go wrong, this is when it'll happen. I'm going to leave it like that. Again, that needs to dry. That varnish needs to be really dry for the next stage, because we're going to put something over the top of it to give them the realistic look. So again, we're going to let that one dry properly. Okay, that's quite dry now. Now the other thing, of course, is no matter what the fly is, you really don't want to obscure the hook to stop it taking hold. Now what I like also about these is if you do it properly, this stuff will actually push down out of the way, away from the hook. It depends on a few things. We're going to coat this in a minute in some UV resin, so that's one of the things. The other thing is getting that cut in the right place. If you don't get the cut deep enough, it won't push down out of the way. It's a bit like a weed guard in effect. Okay, so what we're going to do now, we're going to put some UV resin onto the eyes. I use the full-in mill. I haven't tried the other stuff, so I can't comment on it. This stuff is good. Pot's nearly empty, so it takes a while to get down there. Right, so not too much, and just form it into a nice little circle to make the eyeball, and then very quickly, before it can spread, get the UV torch and get that to set. And if you look there now, you've got a nice little raised eyeball. The black shines through it, and I just think it's a bit more realistic than the crab body eyes. Okay, let's do the other one. Torch on it. Yeah, there. I think they look quite good. And again, if you want to stop there, that's fine. Now I've seen a couple of the flies done on Facebook that have been shared, and they colour the body in really pretty flies, and if that's what you want to do, I'm not sure how they do it, but I'm sure there's a YouTube video out there somewhere. I prefer to leave them plain, because as I say, these were for Crooked Island, where the white ones and the clear ones The only really colours you need out there is white or the sandy colour ones. So I'm going to leave the body as that colour. What I am going to do is get the resin again and just coat these, the top. It just gives it a shell-like appearance, but when you're doing it, don't go any further up the fly than there. And again, this is so that you've got some flexibility in it, and it will clear the hook if the fish takes, or when the fish takes. So just a thin layer of resin. Keep it well away from the hook point. If you get it on there, it's a devil to get off. Okay, that's plenty. Just spread it about with a dubbing needle. Don't forget to clean your dubbing needle off, because they will go rock hard. Set it off with the torch again. And as far as I'm concerned, that's almost finished. Once it's all dried off, I do like to put a bit of varnish over the head. I do like shiny things, so use the hard as nails varnish just for that. But that, to me, is a fish catching fly. Well, give it a go. Hope it works out. If not, drop us a message on YouTube and I'll see if I can help out. Thank you very much.